Is this truly my fate? Must I walk this path alone?
The silk against her skin felt like chains. Seo Hwa-yeon stood motionless in the bridal chamber, wrapped in crimson and gold, her hair pinned with ornaments so heavy her neck ached. Each hairpin had been placed with precision by the court ladies, each one a small declaration of her new status. Crown Princess. The title should have filled her with pride. Instead, it felt like a noose tightening around her throat. The candles flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls like ghosts waiting to witness her humiliation. Outside, the palace celebrated. She could hear the distant sound of drums, laughter, the clinking of wine cups. Ministers and nobles toasting to the union. Servants gossiping about the beautiful bride. The entire kingdom rejoicing at the marriage that would secure the royal succession. Inside, she was alone. She had been alone for 3 hours. Hwa-yeon's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the layers of her wedding robes. The fabric was exquisite, embroidered with phoenixes and peonies, each stitch representing months of labor by the finest seamstresses in the kingdom. She should feel beautiful. She should feel cherished. Instead, she felt like an object on display. She walked to the window, careful not to disturb her elaborate hair. Through the lattice screen, she could see the palace gardens bathed in moonlight. Lanterns hung from every tree, their warm glow creating a scene of impossible beauty. This was supposed to be the happiest night of her life. Why did it feel like a funeral? A sound at the door made her heart leap. She turned quickly, smoothing her robes, arranging her face into the serene expression she had practiced for years. The door opened. Crown Prince Lee Jinhyun entered with the kind of coldness that made the room feel smaller. Hwa-yeon's breath caught. Even now, even with ice in his eyes, he was beautiful. Tall and lean, with sharp features that looked carved from marble. His wedding robes were black and gold, severe and regal. His hair was pulled back in a top knot, secured with a jade pin that caught the candlelight. But his eyes were empty. He didn't look at her. Not really. He looked through her, as if she were a piece of furniture that had been placed in his room without his consent. His jaw was tight, his shoulders rigid. Every line of his body radiated rejection. Hwa-yeon's heart hammered against her ribs. She had prepared herself for this moment her entire life. The marriage had been arranged when she was 12, sealed when she was 15, and now, at 20, she was finally his wife. She had studied etiquette until her eyes burned. She had learned poetry, music, painting. She had practiced the tea ceremony 1,000 times. She had memorized every rule of proper conduct for a crown princess. But none of it mattered. He stopped 3 steps into the room, maintaining a careful distance. The space between them felt vast, unbridgeable. "I will not touch you," he said. The words landed like stones thrown into still water. The ripples spread through Hwa-yeon's chest, disrupting everything she had built inside herself. Every hope, every dream, every foolish fantasy she had nurtured about this night. She searched his face for anger, for disgust, for anything that might explain this. But there was nothing. Just ice. Just emptiness. Just a wall so high she couldn't see over it. "Your Highness," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Have I done something to displease you?" His jaw tightened. A muscle twitched near his eye. "You exist to displease me." The cruelty of it was so precise it felt rehearsed. As if he had been practicing these words, sharpening them until they could cut cleanly through bone. Hwa-yeon's hands trembled beneath her sleeves. She clasped them together, pressing her nails into her palms until pain bloomed. Anything to keep herself steady. "I will be a good wife," she said quietly, hating how small her voice sounded. "I will serve you well. I will. You will serve no one." He turned toward the door. Panic flared in her chest, hot and desperate. This couldn't be happening. Not on her wedding night. Not after everything her family had sacrificed to secure this match. Not after years of preparation and hope and waiting. "Please," she said, and she hated herself for begging. "Don't leave." He stopped. His hand was on the door frame. For a moment, just a heartbeat, she thought he might soften. Might turn around. might look at her like she was a person instead of a problem. But when he spoke again, his voice was even colder than before. You were forced upon me by the Queen Dowager. I did not choose you. I do not want you. And I will never want you. Each word was a blade. The marriage was a political arrangement. Nothing more. Do not expect warmth from me. Do not expect kindness. Do not expect anything. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like thunder. Hwa-yeon stood there, still wrapped in bridal silk, still crowned with gold, still alone. The candles burned lower, their wax dripping like tears. The celebration outside grew quieter as the hour grew late. And somewhere deep inside her chest, something broke. She didn't cry. She had learned long ago that tears changed nothing. Her mother had taught her that. A noble woman does not weep. She endures. So Hwa-yeon endured. She stood in the center of that beautiful, terrible room and let the pain wash over her without making a sound. She walked to the bed. Untouched. Perfect. The sheets were embroidered with symbols of fertility and happiness. Pomegranates. Butterflies. Entwined branches. All lies. She sat on the edge, careful not to wrinkle the fabric. Her wedding robes pooled around her like blood. She looked at her hands, pale and delicate, trained for tea ceremonies and calligraphy. Useless hands. What good was grace when your husband wouldn't touch you? A soft knock at the door made her straighten. My lady? It was Miran, her personal maid. Young, earnest, loyal. May I enter? Yes. Miran slipped inside, her face carefully blank. But Hwa-yeon saw the pity in her eyes. The knowledge. Of course the servants knew. Everyone would know by morning. Shall I help you prepare for bed, my lady? Hwa-yeon looked at the bed. At the symbols of a union that would never happen. No, she said softly. Leave me. But my lady. Leave me. Miran bowed and retreated. The door closed again. Silence pressed in from all sides. Hwa-yeon sat alone in her wedding chamber until the candles burned out one by one, plunging the room into darkness. She sat until her legs went numb, until the weight of her hair ornaments became unbearable, until the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows. And she made herself a promise. She would survive this. Whatever it took. By morning, the entire palace knew. The crown prince had rejected his bride on their wedding night. The news spread like fire through dry grass. Servants whispered in corridors. Courtiers exchanged knowing glances. Junior wives and concubines smirked behind their fans, grateful it wasn't them. Hwa-yeon heard them. She wasn't supposed to, but the palace walls were thin and secrets were impossible to keep. Did you hear? He didn't touch her. Not even once? Not even once. Just walked in and walked out. How humiliating. I heard she begged him to stay. Really? How pathetic. What did she expect? Everyone knows he's in love with Lady Min. That name. Lady Min. Hwa-yeon heard it again and again, always spoken in hushed, reverent tones. The king's favorite concubine. Beautiful. Clever. Dangerous. Hwa-yeon had seen her once, from a distance. Delicate features. Swan-like neck. Eyes that sparkled with intelligence and malice. She moved through the palace like she owned it, and perhaps she did. Perhaps she owned the crown prince's heart in a way Hwa-yeon never would. Miran helped Hwa-yeon dress in simpler robes. The wedding garments were packed away, beautiful and useless. Hwa-yeon's hair was styled more modestly, though the court ladies who came to attend her worked in stiff silence, their faces tight with disapproval. She knew what they were thinking. Rejected on her wedding night. There must be something wrong with her. When she was finally ready, Hwa-yeon sat in her chambers and stared at the untouched bed. She had been trained to endure shame, but this was different. This was public. This was permanent. This would follow her for the rest of her life. A sharp knock at the door made her spine straighten. The Queen Dowager requests your presence, my lady, a court official announced. Hwa-yeon rose slowly. She smoothed her robes with practiced precision, straightened her spine until it ached, and walked through the palace corridors with her head high. The servants parted before her like water around a stone. Some bowed. Others stared. None met her eyes. If they were going to whisper, let them. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her broken. The walk to the hall of virtuous harmony felt endless. Each step echoed against polished floors. Sunlight streamed through windows, illuminating paintings of virtuous queens and noble ancestors. All those perfect women watching her, judging her failure. The Queen Dowager sat on a raised platform at the far end of the hall, surrounded by advisors and senior court ladies. She was older, perhaps 60, with a face like weathered stone and eyes that missed nothing. Her robes were dark purple, embroidered with dragons that seemed to writhe in the light. Power emanated from her like heat from a flame. Hwa-yeon knelt before the platform, pressing her forehead to the cold floor in the deepest bow. The position was deliberately humiliating, forcing her to grovel like a supplicant. "Lady Seo," the Queen Dowager said, her tone honeyed and venomous. "How unfortunate that the Crown Prince found you unsuitable. Unsuitable." The word hung in the air like poison. "I have failed in my duty, Your Majesty," Hwa-yeon said, her voice carefully neutral. "Give them nothing. Show them nothing." Indeed. The Queen Dowager's fingers drummed against the armrest of her chair, a slow, deliberate rhythm. "There are those who say you were impure, that you came to the marriage bed already tainted by another man." Hwa-yeon's blood turned to ice. Her head was still pressed to the floor, but she felt every eye in the room focused on her. Waiting. Judging. "That is a lie, Your Majesty," she said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. I would never. Lies spread quickly in the palace, my dear. And once they take root, they are difficult to remove. The words were careful. Calculated. Hwa-yeon understood immediately. This was not about truth. This was about power. The Queen Dowager had chosen her as the Crown Prince's bride to secure her own influence, to bind the Seo family to the throne. But now that the marriage had failed, Hwa-yeon had become a liability. A loose thread that needed to be cut. "Please, Your Majesty," Hwa-yeon whispered, still prostrate on the floor. "I will do whatever you ask. I will serve however you need. Just give me a chance to prove." "To prove what?" The Queen Dowager's voice sharpened. "That you can change my grandson's mind? That you can somehow transform yourself into the woman he wants?" "Child, some things cannot be changed." Silence fell over the hall. Hwa-yeon's arms trembled from holding herself in the bow. "There is a precedent for this situation," the Queen Dowager continued, her tone almost pleasant now. "When a royal marriage fails to consummate, when there are questions about the bride's virtue, when the Crown Prince himself rejects his chosen wife, there is a solution." Hwa-yeon's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Exile," the Queen Dowager said simply. "A quiet retreat to the countryside. A chance for reflection and meditation. Perhaps, in time, the situation might be revisited." Exile. The word echoed in Hwa-yeon's mind. Exile meant disgrace. Exile meant losing her title, her position, her family's standing. Exile meant being cast out of the only world she had ever known. "Your Majesty, please. The decision has been made." The Queen Dowager waved her hand dismissively. "You will leave within 3 days. A suitable residence has been arranged in the northern mountains. You will take one servant. Your family has been informed." Hwa-yeon's world tilted. She lifted her head slightly, breaking protocol, and met the Queen Dowager's eyes. For just a moment, she saw something there. Not cruelty. Not even anger. Just cold, practical calculation. She was a problem. And problems had to be eliminated. The Queen Dowager smiled. It was the kind of smile that preceded bloodshed. "You may go." Hwa-yeon returned to her chambers in a daze. Her legs moved automatically, carrying her through corridors that suddenly felt like prison hallways. Servants stepped aside as she passed, their faces carefully blank. But she saw it in their eyes. Relief. They were glad it wasn't them. Miran was waiting in the chambers, her young face streaked with tears. "My lady, I heard, is it true?" Hwa-yeon nodded slowly. Words felt impossible. 3 days, she whispered. "We have 3 days." Miran burst into fresh sobs. "It's not fair. You did nothing wrong." "Nothing wrong." Hwa-yeon almost laughed. She had committed the greatest sin a woman could commit in this world. She had failed to please a man. Her beauty, Her education, her breeding, her virtue, none of it mattered. The crown prince didn't want her, and so she was worthless. "Pack my things," Hwa-yeon said quietly. "Only what we can carry. Simple clothes. Nothing ostentatious. But my lady, your wedding robes, your jewelry. Leave them. They mean nothing now." As Miran began to gather belongings with shaking hands, Hwa-yeon walked to the window. The palace gardens stretched out below, beautiful and poisonous. Somewhere in this vast complex of courtyards and halls, the crown prince was living his life, unconcerned with the destruction he had caused. And somewhere, Lady Min was probably smiling. Hwa-yeon pressed her hand against the window frame, her fingers going white with pressure. "I did everything right," she thought. "I was perfect." And it still wasn't enough. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A court official entered, his face impassive. "A letter for you, my lady. From your family." He handed her a sealed envelope and left without another word. Hwa-yeon stared at the familiar seal. Her father's seal. The Seo family crest. She had dreamed of making them proud, of elevating their status through this marriage. Instead, she had brought them shame. She broke the seal with trembling fingers and unfolded the letter. The message was short. "Do not bring further shame upon our house. Accept your fate with dignity. Do not contact us. Do not return." That was all. No comfort. No sympathy. Not even a signature. Her father had disowned her. Hwa-yeon read the words 3 times, unable to process them. Her mother had sent nothing. No letter. No message. Just silence. She crumpled the paper in her fist. Something hot and sharp rose in her throat, but she swallowed it down. No tears. Not now. Not ever. "Miran," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Is there any word from my mother?" Miran shook her head, eyes downcast. "Nothing, my lady." Of course not. Her mother was a practical woman. She understood the rules of this world. A daughter who failed was worse than a daughter who died. At least death could be mourned. Failure was just embarrassing. Hwa-yeon walked to her writing desk and pulled out fresh paper. She wrote 2 letters. One to her father, formally releasing him from any obligation to her. One to her mother, saying goodbye. She didn't expect responses. She wrote them anyway. The next 3 days passed in a blur of humiliation. Court ladies came to claim the wedding gifts that had been given to Hwa-yeon. Jewels, fabrics, precious ornaments. One by one, they were stripped away. The crown prince requests the return of the Jade Phoenix, a stern-faced woman announced, holding out her hand. Hwa-yeon removed the hairpin slowly. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever owned, carved from imperial jade, worth more than her family's estate. She placed it in the woman's palm without a word. The pearl necklace as well. The silk robes. The golden mirror. Everything. They took everything. By the 3rd day, Hwa-yeon's chambers were nearly bare. The only things remaining were a few simple cotton robes, basic toiletries, and a small wooden box containing her mother's old hairpins, the only items she had brought from home. Miran had packed 2 small bundles. That was all they would be allowed to take. On the final morning, Hwa-yeon dressed in plain gray robes. No makeup. No jewelry. Her hair was pulled back in a simple braid. She looked at herself in the small bronze mirror Miran had managed to keep hidden. She looked like a ghost. "My lady," Miran whispered. "The carriage is ready." Hwa-yeon nodded. She took one last look at the chambers that had been hers for such a brief, terrible time. The beautiful room that should have been filled with happiness. Instead, it held only the echo of rejection. She walked out without looking back. The carriage was waiting in a side courtyard, away from the main gates. Even her exile had to be secretive, shameful. Can't let the people see the crown princess being cast out. Bad for the royal image. A small crowd had gathered anyway. Servants. Minor officials. People who had nothing better to do than watch someone's life fall apart. They whispered behind their hands as Hwa-yeon approached the carriage. Miran helped her inside, then climbed in after her with the bundles. The driver, a grim-faced man with hard eyes, said nothing. He just cracked the whip, and the carriage lurched forward. As they rolled through the palace gates, Hwa-yeon looked back one last time. The walls were high, the roofs golden, the gardens beautiful. She had dreamed of this place her entire life. Dreamed of being crown princess, of walking these halls with her head high, of maybe foolishly being loved. Now it was a tomb. A beautiful, gilded tomb that had swallowed her whole and spit her out. The carriage picked up speed. The palace grew smaller. And Hwa-yeon finally let herself feel the weight of what had happened. She had lost everything. Her title, her family, her future. All because one man had looked at her and decided she wasn't worth loving. The journey north was brutal. The roads were frozen, rough, full of ruts and stones that made the carriage shake violently. Hwa-yeon and Miran huddled together under thin blankets, trying to conserve warmth. The driver never spoke to them. He stopped only when absolutely necessary, and even then, he watched them with cold suspicion, as if they might try to escape. Where would they go? Hwa-yeon thought bitterly. There was nowhere to run. Her family had abandoned her. She had no friends at court. She'd never been allowed to make any. The crown prince wanted nothing to do with her. She was completely, utterly alone. Except for Miran. The young maid stayed close, loyal despite having every reason to abandon Hwa-yeon and seek employment elsewhere. At night, when they stopped at shabby inns, Miran would brush Hwa-yeon's hair and whisper encouragements. "It will be all right, my lady. You'll see. This is just temporary." But Hwa-yeon knew better. Nothing about this was temporary. This was her life now. Exile. Disgrace. Poverty. On the third night, they stopped at a small village at the base of the northern mountains. The inn was dirty, the room cramped and cold. The innkeeper's wife gave them sour looks and charged them double the normal rate. "Palace refugees," she muttered loudly enough for them to hear. "Always thinking they're better than everyone else." Hwa-yeon said nothing. She had learned silence was the safest response. That night, lying on a hard mat with Miran beside her, Hwa-yeon felt it for the first time. A flutter in her belly. At first, she thought it was hunger. They hadn't eaten much, the food at the inns was terrible, and their money was running out. But then it came again, stronger this time. A gentle rolling sensation, like something alive moving inside her. She pressed a hand to her stomach, her breath catching in her throat. No, it wasn't possible. They had never touched. The crown prince had made that abundantly clear. He had rejected her, humiliated her, cast her out. They had never shared a bed, never consummated the marriage, never. But the signs were there. The nausea she had ignored, thinking it was just stress. The exhaustion that had plagued her for weeks. The tenderness in her breasts. The way her monthly cycle had stopped. She had been so consumed by shame and grief that she hadn't noticed her own body changing. "Miran," she whispered in the darkness. "Wake up." Miran stirred, rubbing her eyes. "My lady? What's wrong? How long has it been since my last cycle?" Miran frowned, confused by the question. "Your cycle, my lady? I don't know. I haven't prepared your monthly cloths in 2 months? 3. Hwa-yeon's hands shook. 3 months. 3 months ago, before the wedding, there had been a banquet. A celebration of the upcoming union. She remembered drinking wine. Too much wine. The court ladies had encouraged her, saying it would help her relax before the wedding night. She remembered feeling dizzy, unsteady, the room spinning. And then, nothing. She had woken the next morning in her own chambers, alone, fully clothed, with no memory of how she had gotten there. Her head had pounded, her mouth dry. She had thought nothing of it. Just too much wine. Just nerves before the wedding. But now, "Oh gods," she whispered, pressing both hands to her stomach. Miran sat up quickly, alarmed. "My lady, what is it? Are you ill?" Hwa-yeon couldn't speak. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together fragments of memory. The banquet. The wine. The dizziness. And then, had there been someone? A figure in the shadows? A voice, low and familiar? She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to remember. "You're beautiful when you're vulnerable." Who had said that? When? A hand on her shoulder. Guiding her somewhere. A room. Not her own. Darker. Quieter. Don't fight it. And then nothing. Just blackness. Just the void of forgotten time. "My lady, you're scaring me," Miran said, her voice trembling. Hwa-yeon opened her eyes. I think I think I'm pregnant. Miran's face went white. What? But that's impossible. The crown prince, he never. I know. Hwa-yeon's voice was barely audible. But before the wedding, at the banquet, I don't remember. There's a gap. Hours I can't account for. Understanding slowly dawned on Miran's face, followed by horror. You think someone? She couldn't finish the sentence. Hwa-yeon pressed her hands harder against her stomach, where that tiny flutter continued. Life. Growing inside her. Life that shouldn't exist. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know what happened. But even as she said it, a terrible certainty was growing inside her. The voice. The familiar voice in the darkness. The words that had felt both foreign and intimate. You're beautiful when you're vulnerable. Who would have access to her chambers? Who would dare? Who would have reason to? The crown prince. No. He had rejected her so completely, so cruelly. Why would he, unless it hadn't been about her at all. Unless it had been about something else. Duty. Obligation. The need for an heir. Maybe he had taken what he needed while she was unconscious, unable to remember, unable to consent. And then, on the wedding night, he had rejected her publicly to maintain his relationship with Lady Min. Rage bloomed in her chest, hot and vicious. Rage unlike anything she had ever felt. If it was true, if he had violated her and then cast her out, if she carried his child. But she swallowed the rage down. Rage would not save her. Not here. Not now. Miran, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. Say nothing. Do you understand? Not a word to anyone. But my lady, if you're with child, they need to know. The palace needs to know. This changes everything. No. Hwa-yeon grabbed Miran's wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Listen to me. If anyone discovers I'm pregnant, they will call me a whore. They will say I lay with another man. They will kill me. But the child doesn't matter. Not to them. They've already decided I'm worthless. A pregnant, disgraced crown princess? They'll make an example of me. Miran's eyes filled with tears. What will you do? Hwa-yeon released her wrist and lay back down, staring at the ceiling. What would she do? She had no money, no family, no protection. She was being taken to some remote village in the mountains where she would be forgotten. And she was pregnant. With the crown prince's child. A child he would never acknowledge. A child that would be called a bastard. A child that would suffer for her sins. Unless she disappeared completely. Unless she found a way to survive outside the palace's reach. Unless she raised this child in secret, away from the politics and poison of the court. We'll figure it out, she said quietly. One step at a time. But you must promise me, Miran. Promise you'll say nothing. Miran nodded, wiping her tears. I promise, my lady. I'll protect you. Whatever it takes. Hwa-yeon reached out and squeezed her hand. Thank you. They lay in silence for a long time after that. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, cold and merciless. Inside, Hwa-yeon felt the flutter in her belly again, stronger now. Life. Persistent. Unwanted. And yet it was hers. Drop a comment if you're still reading. Tell me, should Hwa-yeon keep the child or try to end the pregnancy? What would you do in her position? Don't forget to like if this story is pulling you in. Subscribe. The carriage finally stopped in a village, so remote it didn't even have a proper name. The locals just called it Northern End, as if the world simply ceased to exist beyond this point. Mountains loomed on all sides, their peaks white with eternal snow. The air was thin and cold, burning Hwa-yeon's lungs with each breath. The driver dumped their bundles onto the frozen ground without ceremony. This is it, he grunted. The magistrate's expecting you. Don't cause trouble. He didn't wait for a response. The carriage rattled away, leaving Hwa-yeon and Miran standing in the middle of a dirt road, surrounded by suspicious stares from villagers who had paused their work to watch. A woman with a face like dried leather spat at their feet. Palace whore, she muttered. Miran stepped forward, ready to defend her lady, but Hwa-yeon caught her arm. Don't, she whispered. It will only make things worse. They gathered their bundles and walked toward the largest building in the village, a squat, ugly structure that served as both the magistrate's office and his residence. The magistrate himself appeared in the doorway before they could knock. He was a bloated man with small, cruel eyes and a mouth that seemed permanently twisted in a sneer. So you're the disgraced crown princess, he said, looking Hwa-yeon up and down like she was livestock. You don't look like much. Hwa-yeon kept her eyes lowered. I am Seo Hwa-yeon. I was told accommodations would be arranged. The magistrate laughed, a wet, unpleasant sound. Accommodations. Listen to her, talking like she still matters. He gestured vaguely down the road. There's a room above the inn. It's yours until the Queen Dowager decides what to do with you. If I were you, I'd pray she forgets you exist. How much is the room? Hwa-yeon asked quietly. 3 silver pieces a month. Plus 2 for food. It was outrageous. Highway robbery. Hwa-yeon had maybe 15 silver pieces total in the small pouch hidden in her robes. At this rate, she'd be destitute in 3 months. But she had no choice. I understand, she said. The magistrate's smile widened. Good. Remember, you're here at the Queen Dowager's pleasure. 1 complaint from me, and you'll find yourself in a much less comfortable situation. Understood? Yes, sir. He turned and disappeared back into his residence, leaving them standing in the cold. Miran's hands were shaking with anger. My lady, this is... I know. Hwa-yeon picked up her bundle. Come. Let's find this room. The inn was barely worthy of the name. A ramshackle building with a crooked roof and walls that looked ready to collapse. The innkeeper's wife, the same leather-faced woman who had spat at them, showed them to a room on the 2nd floor with all the warmth of a prison guard. The room was tiny. A single mat on the floor. A broken window covered with paper. No heating. No furniture except a small, battered chest. 5 silver pieces, the woman said, holding out her gnarled hand. The magistrate said 3, Hwa-yeon replied. 3 for the room. 2 for the first month's food. Unless you plan to starve. Hwa-yeon counted out 5 silver pieces, watching her small fortune dwindle. The woman snatched them and left without another word. When the door closed, Miran finally let her tears fall. This is worse than a servant's quarters, she sobbed. You're the crown princess. You shouldn't be living like this. I'm not the crown princess anymore, Hwa-yeon said quietly. She set down her bundle and went to the window, looking out at the desolate village. I'm nothing. The sooner we accept that, the better. But even as she said it, her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. To the secret growing there. The flutter had become more frequent over the past few days. More real. She wasn't nothing. She was carrying life. Even if that life would destroy her. The days in Northern End blurred together in a haze of cold, hunger, and isolation. The villagers wanted nothing to do with the disgraced palace woman. They whispered about her, mocked her, sometimes threw stones at her door when they were drunk. Hwa-yeon endured it all in silence. Her money ran out faster than she'd feared. The innkeeper's wife charged her for everything: water, firewood, even the privilege of using the latrine. Within 2 months, Hwa-yeon was down to her last 3 silver pieces. And her belly was growing. She tried to hide it beneath loose robes, wrapping cloth around her midsection to compress the swell. But it was becoming harder. The child inside her was strong, active, demanding space. Miran did what she could. She took on washing work, scrubbing clothes for the villagers in the icy river until her hands bled. She brought back copper pieces, sometimes just a few vegetables. They survived on thin soup and stale rice. Hwa-yeon tried to help, but she was weak. The pregnancy drained her. She was constantly tired, constantly nauseous, constantly aware that she was running out of time. One morning, 3 months into their exile, the innkeeper's wife barged into their room without knocking. You're late on payment, she announced. Hwa-yeon struggled to sit up. I need a few more days. You've had enough days. The woman's eyes narrowed. Unless you've got something else to trade. The implication was clear. Disgusting. I'll find the money, Hwa-yeon said firmly. You better. Otherwise, you'll find yourself sleeping in the snow. The woman turned to leave, then paused. Her eyes lingered on Hwa-yeon's midsection, on the way the loose robes couldn't quite hide the swell anymore. You're getting fat, she said slowly. Or, Hwa-yeon's blood turned to ice. The woman's expression shifted from suspicion to certainty to malicious glee. You're with child, she whispered. Then louder, you're pregnant. No, Don't lie to me, girl. I've birthed 6 children. I know what a pregnant belly looks like. The woman's grin was vicious. Oh, this is rich. The disgraced crown princess, pregnant and unwed. Wait until the magistrate hears about this. Please, Hwa-yeon begged, all pride gone. Please don't tell anyone. Why shouldn't I? Maybe there's a reward for information about palace horse-bearing bastards. The woman was already moving toward the door. Miran jumped in front of her. Wait. We'll pay you. We'll give you everything we have. Just please don't tell. The woman considered this, her eyes calculating. Everything you have? That's what, 2 silver pieces? 3. She shook her head. Not worth it. The magistrate will pay better. She shoved past Miran and thundered down the stairs. Hwa-yeon and Miran stared at each other in horror. We have to run, Miran said urgently. Now, before she reaches the magistrate. Run where? Hwa-yeon asked, but she was already moving, grabbing what little they had. I'm 4 months pregnant. We have no money. It's winter. We'll figure it out. We have to try. They fled the inn through the back entrance, moving as quickly as Hwa-yeon's condition allowed. The village was small, but they knew the surrounding forest from Miran's trips to gather firewood. If they could just make it to the trees, maybe they could. There! A shout from behind them. The magistrate, flanked by 2 guards, was pointing at them. His face was red with excitement. Seize them. The pregnant whore is trying to escape. Hwa-yeon's heart hammered. They ran. Miran half-dragged her toward the tree line, but the guards were faster. One of them caught Miran's arm, yanking her back. The other grabbed Hwa-yeon, his fingers digging painfully into her shoulder. Let her go. Miran screamed, fighting like a wild thing. She's pregnant. You'll hurt the baby. That bastard baby is evidence, the magistrate wheezed, finally catching up. He looked at Hwa-yeon with undisguised contempt. The Queen Dowager will want to know about this. A disgraced crown princess bearing some peasant's child. This is treason. It's not a peasant's child, Hwa-yeon said before she could stop herself. The magistrate's eyebrows shot up. Oh? Then whose is it? Hwa-yeon met his eyes. She had nothing left to lose. The crown prince's. Silence fell like a hammer. The magistrate stared at her. The guards stared at her. Even Miran looked shocked that she'd admitted it. Then the magistrate laughed. It was a horrible sound, mocking and cruel. The crown prince's? The same prince who rejected you on your wedding night? The same prince who had you exiled for being impure? He laughed harder. You're not just a whore, you're a delusional whore. It's true, Hwa-yeon insisted, desperation making her reckless. 3 months before the wedding, at the banquet, he what? Snuck into your chambers and bedded you while you slept. The magistrate wiped tears of mirth from his eyes. That's the best lie you could come up with? I'm not lying. Enough. The magistrate's expression turned cold. Lock them up. I'll send word to the palace immediately. The Queen Dowager will want to handle this personally. The guards dragged them toward the magistrate's building. Hwa-yeon didn't fight. What was the point? She'd played her last card, and it had failed. They were thrown into a cell in the basement, a stone room with no windows, no heat, nothing but dirty straw on the floor. The doors slammed shut and darkness swallowed them. Miran immediately went to Hwa-yeon, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? The baby? The baby is fine, Hwa-yeon said dully. She sank onto the straw exhausted. For now. Why did you tell them? Miran whispered. Now they'll never believe you. They'll think you're making it up to save yourself. Because it's the truth. Hwa-yeon closed her eyes. Not that truth matters. It never has. They sat in the darkness for hours. Or maybe days. Time lost meaning in the cell. Guards brought them water but no food. The cold seeped into their bones. Hwa-yeon felt the baby move inside her as if sensing the danger. I'm sorry, she whispered to her unborn child. I'm so sorry. The response from the palace came faster than expected. The guards arrived at night, 5 days after Hwa-yeon's arrest. They weren't ordinary palace guards. These were from the Queen Dowager's personal contingent. Elite. Ruthless. Anonymous behind black masks. The magistrate practically groveled before them. She's in the cell, just as I said. Pregnant and claiming the child belongs to the crown prince. Can you imagine? The audacity. Where is she? One of the guards interrupted. The magistrate led them to the basement. The cell door opened. Torchlight spilled in, blinding after days of darkness. Out, a guard commanded. Hwa-yeon struggled to her feet, Miran helping her. They were pulled from the cell and dragged up the stairs. The magistrate watched with hungry eyes. What should I do with the maid? He asked. One of the guards glanced at Miran. Let her go. She's not important. No, Hwa-yeon gasped. She stays with me. Please. She's all I have. The guard considered this. Fine. Bring them both. They were taken outside. A closed carriage waited, black and unmarked. This wasn't a royal carriage. This was something else. Something secret. Hwa-yeon's stomach turned. She knew what this meant. They weren't being taken back to the palace for trial. They were being taken somewhere to be disappeared. Get in, a guard ordered. Miran climbed in first, then helped Hwa-yeon. The guards climbed in after them. The door closed. The carriage lurched forward. They rode in silence for what felt like hours. The guards said nothing. Their faces remained hidden behind masks. They were ghosts. Executioners without names. Finally, the carriage stopped. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, along with the sound of rushing water. They were in the forest, far from any village. The trees loomed like giants in the darkness. And ahead, Hwa-yeon could hear the roar of the river. Her heart began to pound. Out, a guard said. They were pulled from the carriage and marched through the trees. The ground was frozen, treacherous. Hwa-yeon stumbled, her pregnant belly throwing off her balance. A guard caught her arm, not gently, but enough to keep her from falling. They reached a cliff overlooking the river. Below, the water churned, black and violent. Ice clung to the rocks on either side. This was it. This was where she would die. The guards formed a semicircle around them. One stepped forward, the leader, presumably. The Queen Dowager sends her regards, he said, his voice muffled by the mask. Hwa-yeon lifted her chin. If she was going to die, she would die with dignity. Does she? Hwa-yeon asked. Or does she send her fear? The guard tilted his head. Fear. The child I carry is the crown prince's. She knows it. That's why she sent you. If she truly believed I was lying, she would have brought me back to the palace for a public execution. But she can't risk that, can she? Can't risk someone examining the child and discovering the truth. Silence. Then the guard laughed. You're clever. I'll give you that. But clever won't save you. I know. Hwa-yeon glanced at Miran, who was trembling beside her. Let the girl go. She's done nothing wrong. No, Miran sobbed. I won't leave you. You have to, Hwa-yeon said gently. Please, Miran. Live. Tell my story. Tell the truth. Enough talk, the guard interrupted. He gestured to his men. Throw them both in. 2 guards grabbed Miran. She screamed, fighting with desperate strength. Run. Hwa-yeon shouted. Miran, run. In the chaos, Miran managed to break free. She didn't hesitate. She ran into the forest, disappearing into the darkness. The guards started after her, but their leader called them back. Let her go. She's nobody. We came for the pregnant one. The remaining guards closed in on Hwa-yeon. She backed toward the cliff's edge, her hands instinctively protecting her belly. Please, she whispered. The baby? The bastard has to die with you, the guard said. Orders. It's not a bastard. It's the crown prince's child. It's enough. They grabbed her. She fought, but she was weak from hunger and pregnancy. They dragged her to the very edge of the cliff. Below, the water roared like a beast. Any last words? The guard asked. Hwa-yeon looked at him. At the masked face. At the hands that would push her to her death. And she thought of the crown prince. Of the Queen Dowager. Of everyone who had destroyed her. I curse you, she said, her voice clear and strong. All of you. I curse the palace. I curse the Queen Dowager. I curse the crown prince who violated me and then cast me aside like garbage. And I swear, if there is justice in this world or the next, if there is any power that listens to the prayers of the wronged, I will have my revenge. The guard shrugged. Noted. He pushed her. Hwa-yeon fell. The world became a blur of darkness and cold and sound. The air screamed past her. Her hands clutched her belly, trying to protect the life inside her even as her own life ended. She hit the water. The cold was shocking. It drove the air from her lungs. The current grabbed her immediately, pulling her down, spinning her, smashing her against rocks. She tried to swim, but the weight of her wet robes dragged her under. Water filled her mouth. Her lungs. Her vision darkened. She thought of her child. Of the babies growing inside her, she'd felt them move in different patterns, suspected there might be more than one. I'm sorry, she thought. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. The darkness swallowed her. And then, pain. Blinding, excruciating pain in her abdomen. Her body was trying to expel the babies, even as she drowned. Some terrible instinct, trying to save them even if she couldn't be saved. She felt herself being pushed toward the shore by the current. Felt her body scrape against rocks. Felt air against her face as she was deposited on a muddy bank. She couldn't move. Could barely breathe. But she was alive. For now, the contractions came in waves. Her body was giving birth. Here. Now. On this frozen riverbank in the middle of nowhere. She screamed, but no sound came out. Just a wet, choking gasp. The pain was beyond anything she'd imagined. It tore through her in waves, each one worse than the last. She was dying. She knew she was dying. But her body wouldn't stop. Wouldn't give her the mercy of death until this was finished. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only pain. Only pressure. Only the feeling of something tearing inside her. And then, a baby's cry. Small. Weak. But alive. Hwa-yeon forced her eyes open. In the dim moonlight, she saw the tiny form beside her. She reached out with trembling hands and pulled the baby onto her chest. A boy. Perfect. Covered in blood and vernix, but perfect. But the contractions hadn't stopped. Another wave of pain. Another baby. Another cry joining the first. A second boy. Hwa-yeon wept as she gathered him close to. Two. She'd had two. But the pain continued. No. Not possible. A third wave. Stronger than the others. Please, she begged whatever gods might be listening. Please let this be the last one. A third baby slipped into the world. The smallest of the three. A girl. Triplets. Hwa-yeon had given birth to triplets. She looked at them, these three tiny miracles. They were early. Too early. But they were breathing. Fighting. Living. She tried to clean them with the edge of her wet robes. Tried to keep them warm against her body. But she was so cold. So tired. Blood pooled beneath her, dark and thick. She was bleeding out. She delivered the babies, but the afterbirth wouldn't come. Something was wrong. Something was tearing inside her. She could feel her life draining away with every heartbeat. No, she whispered. Please. Not yet. They need me. But her vision was fading. Her hands were going numb. She looked at her babies one last time. At their tiny faces. At the way they moved, reaching for warmth, for life, for a mother who was abandoning them. I'm sorry, she whispered. I wanted to protect you. I wanted to watch you grow. I wanted. Her voice failed. The world went dark. And Seo Hwa-yeon died on a frozen riverbank, surrounded by the children she would never know. But death was not the end. In the moment between her last breath and the void, Hwa-yeon felt something. A pull. A force like invisible hands grabbing her soul and yanking it backward. Light exploded behind her eyes. Sensation returned, air in her lungs, blood in her veins, a heartbeat strong and steady. Hwa-yeon gasped and sat up. She was in a bed. Soft sheets. Silk pillows. The scent of jasmine and citrus in the air. Her hands flew to her stomach. Flat. No pregnancy. No blood. No pain. She scrambled out of bed and stumbled to the mirror on the wall. The face looking back at her was young. 17 years old. Smooth skin. Bright eyes. No trace of suffering or death. This was her room. Her old room. In the Seo family estate. Before everything. Hwa-yeon's legs gave out. She collapsed to the floor, gasping, her mind screaming. This wasn't possible. She had died. She had felt death. She had left 3 babies on a riverbank and... The babies. Oh gods, the babies. Were they real? Had any of it been real? She looked at her hands. They were unmarked, soft, the hands of a pampered noble daughter who had never known hardship. But she could still feel the cold of the river. Still feel the pain of childbirth. Still remember every moment of her suffering. A knock at the door made her flinch. Young mistress. A servant's voice. Are you awake? Hwa-yeon recognized that voice. Sunmi. An older servant who had died of fever 2 years before Hwa-yeon's wedding. But she was here. Alive. I'm awake, Hwa-yeon managed. Your mother requests your presence for breakfast. Her mother. Her mother who had abandoned her, who had sent no word when she was exiled. But that hadn't happened yet. None of it had happened yet. Hwa-yeon's mind raced, trying to understand. She stood slowly, testing her legs. They held. She was whole. Healthy. Young. Reborn. The words settled into her mind with the weight of certainty. She had died. And she had been reborn. Sent back to before the wedding. Before the rejection. Before the exile and the fall and the death. Given another chance. But why? Hwa-yeon looked at her reflection again. At the young, naive face staring back at her. I curse the palace, she had said in her final moments. I curse the crown prince. If there is justice in this world or the next, I will have my revenge. And something had listened. A smile slowly spread across Hwa-yeon's face. It was not the smile of the innocent girl she appeared to be. It was cold, calculating, predatory. She had been given a second chance. And this time, she would not be a victim. This time, she would be the hunter. Tell my mother I'll be down shortly, she called to Sunmi. Yes, young mistress. Hwa-yeon turned away from the mirror and began to dress. Her mind was already working, planning, strategizing. She knew everything that would happen. Every betrayal. Every trap. Every moment of pain. And she knew something else. She knew she would have the children again. Those 3 babies. Jien, Miho, Saran. They were real. They would exist again. And this time, she would protect them. This time, she would use them. Because in this world, in this palace full of vipers, the only way to survive was to become a viper yourself. And Hwa-yeon had 3 years to prepare. 3 years to become someone the crown prince would fear. 3 years to destroy everyone who had destroyed her. The game had begun. And this time, Hwa-yeon was going to win. Are you still with me? Comment revenge if you want to see Hwa-yeon destroy everyone who wronged her. This is just the beginning. Like this video if you're addicted to this story. Subscribe. Breakfast with her family was surreal. Hwa-yeon sat at the low table, watching her mother and father eat with practiced elegance, and felt like she was watching ghosts. These people who had abandoned her, who had disowned her without a second thought, who had left her to die in exile, they were right here, smiling, discussing mundane things like the weather and the upcoming harvest festival. Her father, Lord Seo Hwa-yeon, was a minor official in the Ministry of Rights. A cautious man, always calculating how to advance without taking risks. His face was softer now, unmarked by the stress lines she remembered from later years. Her mother, Lady Yoon, was beautiful in that cold, porcelain way that noble ladies cultivated. She had taught Hwa-yeon everything about being a proper woman, how to walk, talk, smile, defer, how to be invisible until needed. Hwa-yeon, her mother said, setting down her chopsticks. You look pale. Are you sleeping well? The concern in her voice sounded genuine. But Hwa-yeon remembered the silence. The lack of any message when she'd been exiled. The way her mother had simply erased her. I had strange dreams, Hwa-yeon said carefully. Very vivid. Dreams are meaningless, her father grunted. Don't dwell on them. If only you knew, Hwa-yeon thought. She ate slowly, her mind racing. She needed to know exactly where she was in the timeline. Needed to orient herself. Mother, she said, keeping her voice light and innocent, has there been any news from the palace lately? Her mother's eyes brightened. Actually, yes. There are rumors that the Queen Dowager is beginning to consider matches for the crown prince. He's of age now and the succession must be secured. Hwa-yeon's heart quickened. I see. And has she approached any families yet? Not officially. But you know how these things work. She'll be looking for a girl from a respectable family, someone educated and virtuous, but not so powerful that she threatens the Queen Dowager's own position. Someone exactly like Hwa-yeon. Her father cleared his throat. We should not get our hopes up. The Seo family is not prominent enough for such a match. Perhaps, her mother said, but there was calculation in her eyes. But the Queen Dowager values loyalty over lineage. And our family has always been loyal. They were already planning, already dreaming of the elevation that would come from marrying their daughter to the crown prince. Hwa-yeon felt cold rage settle in her chest. They had pushed her toward that marriage knowing nothing about the crown prince, caring nothing about her happiness. All they saw was advancement. But she kept her face serene. I would be honored to serve the kingdom in whatever way is deemed appropriate. Her mother smiled, pleased. Such a dutiful daughter. This is why I'm certain you'll make an excellent match, whether with the crown prince or another noble son. Hwa-yeon bowed her head modestly. Inside, she was calculating. She had 3 years before the marriage contract would be signed. 3 years before the wedding. 3 years to change everything. But how? The answer came to her with crystalline clarity. She couldn't prevent the marriage entirely. The Queen Dowager had chosen her specifically because the Seo family was weak, easy to control. If Hwa-yeon refused or made herself unsuitable, the Queen Dowager would simply choose another girl, probably Lady Min, and history would proceed without her. No, she needed to be chosen. Needed to enter the palace. But on her terms this time. After breakfast, Hwa-yeon retreated to her room and dismissed her servants. She needed to think. Needed to plan. She sat at her writing desk and pulled out paper and ink. Her hands shook slightly as she picked up the brush. The muscle memory was strange. Her body was 17, but her mind remembered being 23, remembered dying. She began to write. Not a letter. A list. Things I know. The Queen Dowager will approach my family in 2 years and 3 months. The marriage contract will be signed 2 years and 8 months from now. The wedding will be 3 years from now. Lady Min is the Crown Prince's secret lover. The Crown Prince will reject me on our wedding night. 3 months before the wedding, at a banquet, something happened. I was drugged and the Crown Prince. She paused, the brush hovering over the paper. That night, that missing time. She still didn't understand it fully. Had he truly violated her while she was unconscious? Or had someone else orchestrated it? Lady Min? The Queen Dowager? She wrote. I became pregnant with triplets. The Queen Dowager ordered my exile. Guards were sent to kill me. I gave birth and died. Seeing it written out made it feel more real. More impossible. But it had happened. All of it. She turned to a fresh sheet of paper. Things I must do. Learn the truth about that night at the banquet. Discover who my real enemies are. Build power outside the palace. Find a way to protect my children when they come. Destroy everyone who destroyed me. The last item made her pause. Revenge. It sounded simple written down. But how did you destroy the Crown Prince? The Queen Dowager? The entire royal family? Carefully. Strategically. With patience. Hwa-yeon thought about the skills she'd need. In her first life, she'd been trained only in the gentle arts, music, poetry, painting, etiquette. Useless skills for survival. She'd been a decorative object, nothing more. This time would be different. She needed to learn about money, about business, about the networks of power that existed outside the palace walls. She needed allies. Resources. Independence. But how could a 17-year-old noble daughter accomplish any of that without arousing suspicion? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Young mistress. Sunmi's voice. You have a visitor. A visitor? Hwa-yeon quickly hit her notes. Who is it? Lady Cho's daughter, young Lady Mina. Mina. Hwa-yeon remembered her. A childhood friend who had married a merchant's son and been cut off from noble society. They'd lost touch after the wedding announcement. Hwa-yeon had been too consumed with palace preparations to maintain friendships. Send her in, Hwa-yeon said. Mina entered with a bright smile. She was pretty in an unconventional way, round face, mischievous eyes, a mouth that was always ready to laugh. She wore simpler robes than befitted her birth, but she seemed comfortable in them. Hwa-yeon, it's been ages. Mina embraced her warmly. I heard you've been buried in etiquette lessons. Are they working you to death? Hwa-yeon returned the embrace, feeling an unexpected surge of emotion. Mina had always been genuine, always kind. And Hwa-yeon had abandoned her friendship for the sake of palace ambitions. Not quite to death, Hwa-yeon said, managing a smile. How have you been? Wonderful, actually. Mina settled onto a cushion, casual in a way that would scandalize Hwa-yeon's mother. My husband's business is thriving. We just opened a second shop in the merchant district. Silks and fabrics, mostly, but we're expanding into importing goods from the south. Business. Trade. Money. Hwa-yeon's mind seized on this. That sounds fascinating. I've always wondered how trade works, but of course, it's not something noble ladies are supposed to concern themselves with. Mina laughed. Noble ladies aren't supposed to do a lot of things. But you'd be surprised how much power there is in knowing where money flows. She leaned in conspiratorially. Between you and me, the nobles like to pretend they're above commerce, but they're all in debt to merchants. My husband provides silk to half the ministers at court. They may look down on him, but they need him. This was it. This was the opening Hwa-yeon needed. Mina, she said carefully, can I trust you with something? Mina's expression turned serious. Of course. Always. I've been thinking about my future. About the possibility of a royal match. She saw Mina's eyes widen. If that happens, and it might not, I'll be entering a world where I have no real power. I'll be a decorative piece, nothing more. So you want to change that, Mina said shrewdly. I want to understand how power really works. Not the pretty lies they teach us about virtue and obedience, but the truth. The money. The connections. The leverage. Mina studied her for a long moment. You've changed. What happened? Hwa-yeon met her eyes. I had a very vivid dream. About what happens to powerless women in the palace. It wasn't pleasant. That was close enough to the truth. Mina nodded slowly. All right. I can't teach you everything, but I can introduce you to my husband. He knows the merchant networks, the trade routes, the flow of money in and out of the capital. If you're serious about learning, I am. Then we'll start with the basics. But Hwa-yeon, if your parents find out you're involving yourself in commerce, they'll be furious. Noble daughters aren't supposed to. I know what noble daughters are supposed to do, Hwa-yeon interrupted. I also know what happens to noble daughters who have nothing but their virtue to protect them. It's not enough. Mina grinned. You really have changed. I like it. She stood. Come to my house tomorrow afternoon. Tell your mother you're visiting me for tea. We'll start your education. After Mina left, Hwa-yeon sat in silence, her heart pounding with something that felt like hope. She was doing it. She was changing things. Step by step, she would build the foundation for her revenge. Over the next 6 months, Hwa-yeon lived a double life. During the day, she was the dutiful daughter. She attended etiquette lessons, practiced calligraphy, studied poetry. She smiled and bowed and deferred to her parents' wishes. But 3 afternoons a week, she visited Mina. And there, in the back room of a modest merchant's house, she learned about the real world. Mina's husband, Kim Jinho, was a shrewd businessman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. He had risen from poverty through trade, and he understood leverage in a way nobles never could. Money is power, he told Hwa-yeon during their first lesson. The nobles pretend otherwise because they were born with it and never had to fight for it. But take away their family wealth and they're nothing. He taught her about imports and exports, about supply and demand, about the trade routes that connected the kingdom to the wider world. He showed her ledgers, explained profit margins, demonstrated how a small investment could grow into a fortune with patience and timing. The key, he said, is information. Know what people need before they know they need it. Know which harvests will fail, which trade routes are closing, which products are becoming scarce. Information is more valuable than gold. Hwa-yeon absorbed everything like a sponge. Her mind, sharpened by the memories of her past life, connected patterns Jinho didn't even realize he was revealing. She began to make suggestions. What about medicinal herbs from the north? She asked during one session. I've heard there's been a plague in the southern provinces. Demand for medicines will increase. Jinho's eyebrows rose. Where did you hear about the plague? Court gossip. My father mentioned it at dinner. A lie, but a useful one. She remembered the plague from her first life. It would hit in 8 months and last for nearly a year. Jinho considered this. If you're right, there's a fortune to be made. But it's risky. Medicinal herbs are expensive to transport, and if the plague doesn't spread, it will spread, Hwa-yeon said with certainty. Something in her voice made Jinho pause. He studied her carefully. You're unlike any noble lady I've ever met. Good, Hwa-yeon said. Jinho laughed. All right. I'll invest in medicinal herbs. If you're right, I'll give you 10% of the profits. 20%, Hwa-yeon countered. And I want it in my name, held in secret. Jinho's respect grew visible. You want your own money, independent of your family. Yes, that's highly unusual for a woman, especially a noble one. I don't care about usual. I care about survival. Jinho extended his hand. 20%. Deal. They shook on it. 8 months later, the plague hit exactly as Hwa-yeon had predicted. It started in 3 southern provinces and spread rapidly. The demand for medicinal herbs exploded. Jinho's investment multiplied tenfold. Hwa-yeon received her 20%, a sum that would have made her father's eyes pop. Jinho arranged for it to be held in a private account under a false name. Money that was entirely hers, that no one could take away. It was the first piece of her armor. But Hwa-yeon didn't stop there. She reinvested her earnings, this time in rice futures. She remembered a drought that would strike in a year and a half, driving grain prices to unprecedented heights. Jinho was skeptical. Rice is stable. The profits are small. Trust me, Hwa-yeon said. He did. Meanwhile, Hwa-yeon continued her public life as a dutiful daughter. She attended social gatherings, smiled at the right people, made connections with other noble families. She learned who was in debt, who was ambitious, who could be manipulated. She also began cultivating a specific reputation: sweet, intelligent, but slightly naive. Eager to please. Deferential to authority. The perfect crown princess material. And sure enough, 18 months into her second life, the approach came. Hwa-yeon was in the garden, practicing her calligraphy, when her mother rushed out with a letter in her trembling hands. Hwa-yeon, she breathed, her face flushed with excitement. The Queen Dowager has requested a meeting. With our family. Next week. Hwa-yeon's brush stilled. This was it. The beginning of the same path. But this time, she was ready. That's wonderful, Mother, she said, keeping her voice sweet and innocent. What should I prepare? Her mother launched into a flurry of instructions about clothing, deportment, topics to discuss and topics to avoid. Hwa-yeon nodded along, already knowing everything that would be said. That night, alone in her room, she pulled out the notes she'd been keeping. Her plans within plans. She had money now. Not a fortune, but enough to matter. She had connections through Jinho to merchants, traders, even some lower-level palace suppliers. She had information. She knew which court officials were corrupt, which were loyal to the Queen Dowager, which could be bought. And she had a secret weapon. She knew the future. But there was one piece missing. One crucial element she still didn't understand. That night at the banquet. 3 months before the wedding. The night she'd been drugged and violated. She needed to know the truth. Needed to know if it had been the crown prince or someone else. Because if she was going to conceive those children again, Jien, Miho, Saran, she needed to control when and how it happened. The children were her future. Her weapons. Her heirs. She couldn't leave their conception to chance. The meeting with the Queen Dowager took place in one of the palace's smaller receiving halls. Hwa-yeon wore pale blue silk embroidered with cherry blossoms. Her hair was styled simply but elegantly. She looked like a painting of ideal femininity. Inside, she was calculating every word, every gesture. The Queen Dowager sat on a raised platform, exactly as Hwa-yeon remembered. Older. Harder. Eyes that missed nothing. Hwa-yeon's family prostrated themselves. She pressed her forehead to the floor, the position humiliating and familiar. Rise, the Queen Dowager commanded. They obeyed. The Queen Dowager studied Hwa-yeon with cold appraisal. So this is the Seo daughter I've heard about. Accomplished in music and poetry, they say. Your Majesty is too kind, Hwa-yeon murmured, eyes downcast. Playing the role perfectly. I am considering matches for the crown prince, the Queen Dowager said bluntly. The succession must be secured. I need a bride who is intelligent but obedient. Educated but not ambitious. Beautiful but not vain. Impossible standards designed to ensure whoever was chosen would always feel inadequate. Hwa-yeon understood the game now. The Seo family is loyal, the Queen Dowager continued. And loyalty is valuable. Your daughter would be honored to serve the kingdom in this capacity, I presume. Hwa-yeon's father practically vibrated with eagerness. It would be our family's greatest honor, Your Majesty. And you, girl? What do you say? This was the moment. The trap being set. Hwa-yeon raised her eyes slowly, meeting the Queen Dowager's gaze with just the right mix of humility and hope. I would be honored beyond measure to serve the crown prince and the kingdom, she said softly. Though I fear I am unworthy of such a position. The Queen Dowager's lips curved slightly. Appropriate humility. Good. She waved her hand dismissively. The contract will be drawn up. The wedding will take place in 2 years. Prepare yourself. Just like that, Hwa-yeon's fate was sealed. Again. But this time, she smiled. The next 2 years were a careful dance. Hwa-yeon continued her secret lessons with Jinho. Her wealth grew steadily. The rice futures paid off spectacularly when the drought hit. She diversified into textiles, into medicine, into information. She built a network of informants, merchants who traded at the palace, servants who could be bribed, lower officials who resented being overlooked. Nothing dramatic. Just quiet cultivation of useful relationships. She also studied the crown prince, Lee Jinhyun, 23 years old. Educated. Skilled in warfare and governance. Cold. Dutiful. Completely devoted to Lady Min. Hwa-yeon had servants who worked in the crown prince's household report back to her. She learned his schedule, his preferences, his habits. She learned about Lady Min, beautiful, clever, the daughter of a disgraced minister who had managed to charm her way into the crown prince's bed and heart. Lady Min was clever. She played the role of humble concubine while actually controlling much of the crown prince's private life. She had his ear, his trust, his love, and she would see Hwa-yeon as a threat. Good. Let her. 6 months before the wedding, Hwa-yeon attended her first palace banquet as the crown prince's official betrothed. The hall was magnificent. Hundreds of courtiers in silk robes. Music and dancing. Tables laden with delicacies. And at the head of it all, the crown prince, sitting rigid and cold beside the king. Hwa-yeon was seated in the place of honor, near the royal family. She could feel eyes on her from all directions. Judging. Calculating. Wondering if she would succeed where others had failed. The crown prince hadn't looked at her once. Lady Min sat nearby, her position as favored concubine giving her access to these events. She was stunning in crimson silk, her hair adorned with jade. And when she looked at Hwa-yeon, her smile was poison. Crown Princess, she said sweetly, using the title like a weapon. How lovely you look. So young and fresh. Translation, naive and weak. Thank you, Lady Min, Hwa-yeon replied with equal sweetness. And you look radiant as always. That shade of red suits you. Translation, I see you trying to seduce my future husband in public. Lady Min's smile tightened. I do hope the crown prince finds happiness in his marriage. Translation, he'll never love you. I'm certain we'll all find our proper places, Hwa-yeon said mildly. Translation, no yours. The exchange was brief, but the battle lines were drawn. Lady Min had made her position clear. She would not surrender the crown prince without a fight. Hwa-yeon didn't care. She didn't want the crown prince's love. She wanted something far more valuable. His children. His power. His destruction. As the banquet continued, wine flowed freely. Hwa-yeon pretended to drink, but she barely touched the cup. She needed to stay alert. Needed to watch. This was when it had happened in her first life. At a banquet like this. Too much wine. The dizziness. The blank hours. She watched the servers carefully. Watched who refilled her cup. Watched the patterns. And she saw it. A court lady, one of the Queen Dowager's attendants, adding something to Hwa-yeon's wine cup when she thought no one was looking. Just a quick motion. A small vial. Then moving away. So that was how it had been done. Hwa-yeon didn't react. Didn't call out. She simply switched her cup with the one belonging to the lady next to her while everyone was distracted by a performance. Let someone else discover that particular surprise. Sure enough, 30 minutes later, the lady beside her began to look dizzy. Confused. She excused herself, wobbling slightly. Hwa-yeon filed this information away. The Queen Dowager had been drugging her. But why? To make her vulnerable? To orchestrate something specific? She needed more information. Later that night, Hwa-yeon followed a hunch. She'd bribed one of the palace's night guards to let her access the restricted areas after the banquet ended. It cost her a significant sum, but information was worth it. She made her way to the crown prince's private chambers. Not to confront him, just to observe. She hid in an alcove as voices approached. Cannot continue like this, the crown prince was saying. His voice was strained. Tired. Then don't marry her. Lady Min's voice. Sharp. Desperate. I don't have a choice. The Queen Dowager has decided. There are always choices, Jinhyun. Silence. Then, I love you. Only you. The marriage means nothing. If it means nothing, why am I the one hiding in the shadows while she gets the title? The ceremony? The respect. Because that's how it has to be. No. Because you're a coward. Hwa-yeon heard the sound of a slap. Then footsteps. Lady Min storming away. The crown prince stood alone in the corridor, his breathing heavy. Then he punched the wall, hard enough that Hwa-yeon heard his knuckles crack. Interesting. So the crown prince did have feelings. They were just reserved entirely for Lady Min. The marriage to Hwa-yeon was, indeed, just politics. But that didn't explain the drugging. That didn't explain the pregnancy. Unless a terrible thought occurred to Hwa-yeon. What if it hadn't been the crown prince at all? What if someone else had used her drugged state for their own purposes? To create a scandal? To trap the crown prince with an illegitimate heir that would eventually be discovered? The Queen Dowager wanted heirs. But she also wanted control. What better way to control the crown prince than to saddle him with children he didn't want from a wife he didn't love? But then who had fathered the triplets? Hwa-yeon's mind raced through possibilities. She needed to know. Needed to be certain. Because if the children weren't the crown prince's, then everything changed. Hwa-yeon spent the next 3 months obsessively investigating that night from her previous life. She couldn't let it happen the same way again. She needed control over every variable, every possibility. Through her network of informants, she pieced together fragments of information. The court lady who had drugged her wine worked directly for the Queen Dowager. The same woman had been dismissed from palace service 2 years ago, right after Hwa-yeon's exile in the previous timeline. Silenced. Eliminated. Hwa-yeon tracked her down to a small village on the outskirts of the capital. The woman was living in poverty, her face gaunt with hunger and fear. It took 3 visits and a considerable bribe before she would talk. I was just following orders, the woman whispered, her hands shaking as she clutched the silver coins Hwa-yeon had given her. The Queen Dowager said it was necessary. For the succession. For the kingdom. What exactly were you ordered to do? Hwa-yeon asked, keeping her voice gentle despite the rage burning in her chest. To drug your wine at the spring banquet. To make you compliant. Confused. Then to escort you to a specific chamber. Which chamber? The Eastern guest quarters. The ones reserved for visiting dignitaries. Not the crown prince's chambers. Hwa-yeon's pulse quickened. Who is waiting there? The woman's face crumpled. I don't know. I swear I don't know. I was told to leave you there and forget I'd seen anything. The next morning, I moved you back to your own chambers before dawn. Was it the crown prince? I don't think so. He was at the banquet all night. I saw him. Many people saw him. So it hadn't been him. Someone else had been waiting in that room. Someone the Queen Dowager had arranged. Who else knew about this? Hwa-yeon pressed. Only the Queen Dowager and one other person. A physician. Royal Physician Young. He provided the drug and examined you the next morning. Royal Physician Young. Hwa-yeon knew that name. He was one of the Queen Dowager's most trusted advisors. He had also died mysteriously shortly after Hwa-yeon's exile in the previous timeline. Another loose end tied off. What did the physician say after examining me? The woman's voice dropped to barely a whisper. That you were with child. That the plan had worked. The plan. It had all been orchestrated. Every moment of it. The Queen Dowager had deliberately arranged for Hwa-yeon to be violated by someone, not the crown prince, in order to create a pregnancy that could be used for, what? Control? Leverage? Who is the man in that room? Hwa-yeon demanded, her voice sharp now. Think. You must have seen something. The woman shook her head frantically. I didn't see his face. He wore dark robes. But his hands had a scar. A burn mark across the left palm. A scar. Hwa-yeon filed that detail away. It wasn't much, but it was something. She left the woman with enough silver to survive the winter and returned to the capital with her mind churning. The Queen Dowager had orchestrated everything. But why? What was the endgame? And more importantly, who was the real father of her children? 2 months before the wedding, Hwa-yeon made a decision. She would let the banquet happen. She would let herself be drugged. But this time, she would control what happened next. She spent weeks preparing. She acquired a counteragent to the drug from Jinho's connections in the underground medicine trade. She arranged for Miran, who in this timeline was already her trusted maid, to be positioned near the banquet hall with specific instructions. And she identified every man in the palace who had a burn scar on his left palm. There were 3. First, Lord Han, a minister in his 50s, loyal to the Queen Dowager. Married with 4 children. Ruthlessly ambitious. Second, General Kwan, the commander of the palace guard. 40 years old. Unmarried. Devoted to the royal family. Third, the king's younger brother, Prince Yeonsan. 35 years old. Handsome. Charming. With a reputation for being a wastrel and a womanizer. One of these 3 men was the father of her children. Hwa-yeon needed to know which one. Because depending on who it was, her entire strategy would change. The spring banquet arrived exactly as Hwa-yeon remembered it. She dressed in pale pink silk embroidered with cherry blossoms. Her hair was adorned with delicate ornaments. She looked every inch the innocent, eager bride. Inside, she was a coiled spring. The banquet hall was magnificent. Lanterns cast golden light across silk screens. Musicians played. Dancers moved like water. The smell of expensive food and wine filled the air. Hwa-yeon took her place near the royal family. The crown prince sat rigid and distant, exactly as before. Lady Min watched from her position nearby, her eyes burning with jealousy. The Queen Dowager presided over everything like a spider in the center of its web. Wine was served. Hwa-yeon watched as the same court lady from before approached with the wine pot. She saw the woman's hand move to her sleeve, where the vial was hidden. Hwa-yeon pretended not to notice. She held out her cup. The drugged wine poured in, dark red and poisonous. Hwa-yeon raised the cup to her lips. Pretended to drink. Let the wine touch her mouth, but swallowed none of it. Then, when no one was watching, she spat it into a handkerchief and tucked it away. She repeated this performance 3 times over the next hour. To anyone watching, she appeared to be drinking steadily. Getting flushed. Becoming unsteady. But she was completely sober. Around her, the banquet continued. Courtiers laughed and gossiped. The crown prince maintained his cold facade. And the Queen Dowager watched everything with calculating eyes. Finally, Hwa-yeon stood on deliberately shaky legs. "Excuse me," she murmured to no one in particular. "I need air." She let herself sway slightly as she walked toward the exit. The court lady who had drugged her wine immediately appeared at her elbow. "My lady, let me help you," the woman said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Thank you," Hwa-yeon slurred, playing her part perfectly. The woman guided her out of the banquet hall, down a corridor, toward the eastern guest quarters. Exactly as before. But this time, Miran was waiting in the shadows. As the court lady opened the door to the guest chamber, Miran stepped forward and struck her on the back of the head with a wooden club. The woman crumpled without a sound. Hwa-yeon immediately straightened, all pretense of drunkenness gone. "Quick," she whispered. "Hide her." Miran dragged the unconscious woman into a storage closet while Hwa-yeon peered into the darkened guest chamber. Someone was inside. She could see his silhouette against the window. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Waiting. Hwa-yeon took a deep breath and stepped inside. The man turned. In the dim light, she couldn't see his face clearly. But she saw his hands. The left one bore a distinctive burn scar across the palm. "You came," the man said. His voice was cultured. Educated. Familiar in a way that made her skin crawl. Hwa-yeon said nothing. She needed him to reveal himself. He stepped closer. "The Queen Dowager said you would be cooperative." So he knew. He was complicit in this. "Who are you?" Hwa-yeon asked, keeping her voice steady. The man laughed. "Does it matter? You won't remember this anyway. That's the beauty of the drug." He reached for her. Hwa-yeon stepped back and grabbed the dagger she'd hidden in her sleeve. In one fluid motion, she pressed it against his throat. Don't move, she said coldly. The man froze, shocked. You're not drugged. Clearly not. Now, tell me who you are and why the Queen Dowager arranged this, or I'll open your throat right here. She meant it. He saw that in her eyes. You're mad, he breathed. If you kill me. If I kill you, I'll tell everyone you tried to rape the crown princess. Who do you think they'll believe? She pressed the dagger harder. A thin line of blood appeared. Talk. The man swallowed carefully. Prince Yeonsan. I'm Prince Yeonsan, the king's younger brother. Hwa-yeon's mind raced. This made a terrible kind of sense. The Queen Dowager wouldn't have used a common minister or general for this. She needed someone of royal blood. Someone whose children could legitimately claim the throne if the crown prince proved difficult. Why did you agree to this? Hwa-yeon demanded. The Queen Dowager promised me power. Influence. A path to the throne if he stopped. If the crown prince failed to produce heirs, Hwa-yeon finished. And children born of you and me would be of royal blood on both sides. Legitimate enough to challenge any heir the crown prince might father with Lady Min. You're smarter than she said you were, Yeonsan muttered. What else did she tell you? That you would never remember this. That you would conceive and believe the child was the crown prince's. That when you were discovered to be pregnant despite him rejecting you, the scandal would force him to acknowledge the child or face worse embarrassment. It was brilliant, in a horrifying way. The Queen Dowager had created a trap with multiple purposes. If the crown prince acknowledged the children, they would be heirs under his name, but actually Yeonsan's blood. If he rejected them, Yeonsan could eventually claim them as his own and use them to challenge for the throne. Either way, the Queen Dowager maintained control. And Hwa-yeon would have been the pawn who never knew she was being played. How many times was this supposed to happen? Hwa-yeon asked. Yeonsan's silence was answer enough. More than once, she said. The Queen Dowager planned to keep drugging me. Keep bringing me here. Until she was certain I was pregnant. 3 times, Yeonsan admitted. Tonight, next week, and the week after. To ensure conception. Hwa-yeon's rage was so intense she felt cold with it. But she kept her hand steady on the dagger. Here's what's going to happen, she said quietly. You're going to tell the Queen Dowager that tonight was successful. That I was compliant and have no memory of it. You're going to play your part perfectly. Why would I? Because if you don't, I'll go to the crown prince right now and tell him his grandmother is plotting to replace his bloodline with yours. I'll tell him about the drugging, about this room, about everything. And you know what he'll do? Yeonsan's face paled. He'll have you executed for treason, Hwa-yeon continued. Royal blood or not, plotting against the crown prince is a death sentence. Your only chance of survival is to do exactly what I say. You have no proof. Hwa-yeon gestured to the door. The court lady who drugged me is unconscious in the hallway. I have witnesses. I have evidence. And most importantly, I have nothing to lose. You think I care if I die exposing you? I'm already set to marry a man who despises me. Death might be preferable. The madness in her voice was real enough to convince him. What do you want? Yeonsan asked carefully. I want you to keep the Queen Dowager believing her plan worked. I want you to report back that I was successfully compromised. And then I want you to wait. Wait for what? For me to decide whether you live or die. She removed the dagger from his throat and stepped back. Yeonsan rubbed his neck, staring at her like she was a demon. You're not the innocent girl the Queen Dowager described. No, Hwa-yeon said. I'm much worse. She left him there and found Miran in the hallway. The court lady was still unconscious. Leave her, Hwa-yeon instructed. She'll wake up confused. She'll think she fainted. Let her report to the Queen Dowager that she successfully delivered me. And Prince Yeonsan? Will cooperate. He values his life too much to do otherwise. They returned to the banquet separately. Hwa-yeon made sure to appear disheveled and dazed as she slipped back into the hall. She sat in her place, staring at nothing, playing the role of a drugged woman recovering. The Queen Dowager watched her with satisfaction. Perfect. That night, alone in her chambers, Hwa-yeon made careful notes. She now knew the truth. The children she would carry, Jian, Miho, Saran, were not the crown princes. They were Prince Yeonsan's. But that didn't matter. Biology was irrelevant in the palace. What mattered was who claimed them. Who raised them? Who controlled them? In her previous life, she had died never knowing the truth. The children had been born and abandoned. She didn't even know if they had survived past her death. This time would be different. This time, she would conceive the children on her terms. She would control when and how. And she would make sure everyone believed they were the crown prince's legitimate heirs. But first, she needed to neutralize the Queen Dowager's plan. She couldn't let herself be drugged 2 more times. Couldn't risk Yeonsan deciding to go through with it anyway. Couldn't trust that her bluff would hold. She needed a better plan. The next morning, Hwa-yeon requested an audience with the Queen Dowager. It was unusual for the crown princess-to-be to initiate such meetings, but she framed it as seeking guidance on wedding preparations. The Queen Dowager received her in a private sitting room, attended only by a few trusted ladies. "Crown Princess," the Queen Dowager said, her tone pleasant but her eyes calculating. "What brings you here?" Hwa-yeon bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, I wanted to thank you personally for arranging such a beneficial match. I know I am unworthy, but I promise to serve the Crown Prince and the kingdom with all my heart." "How dutiful," the Queen Dowager murmured. "I'm pleased to hear it. There is one matter, however, that concerns me," Hwa-yeon continued, keeping her voice hesitant and innocent. "Last night at the banquet, I felt strange, dizzy and confused. I don't remember parts of the evening." The Queen Dowager's expression didn't change, but Hwa-yeon saw the sharpness in her eyes. "Strange? How concerning. Perhaps you drank too much wine." "Perhaps," Hwa-yeon agreed. "But I've been told that some women in the palace use substances, drugs, to manipulate others. I wouldn't want to become a victim of such schemes." It was a warning disguised as naive concern. Hwa-yeon watched the Queen Dowager carefully. "Who told you such things?" the Queen Dowager asked, her voice dangerously soft. "Oh, just servants' gossip. I'm sure it's nothing. But I thought I should be careful. Especially with the wedding so close. I wouldn't want any scandals." The meaning was clear. "I know what you're doing, and I'm watching." The Queen Dowager studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, cold and sharp. "You're quite perceptive for one so young," she said. "Very well. I'll ensure you're protected from any unfortunate incidents." Translation: the drugging would stop. For now. Hwa-yeon bowed again. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I knew I could trust your wisdom." As she left the Queen Dowager's chambers, Hwa-yeon felt a grim satisfaction. She'd made her position clear without revealing too much. The Queen Dowager would be more cautious now, more calculated. But she wouldn't give up entirely. The game had just become more interesting. Over the next month, Hwa-yeon noticed the increased surveillance. The Queen Dowager had assigned additional servants to help with wedding preparations, all of them spies. Every conversation was monitored. Every movement watched. Hwa-yeon used this to her advantage. She played the role of the dutiful, slightly naive bride perfectly. She attended all the required ceremonies and lessons. She smiled at the right people. She never gave any indication that she was anything other than what she appeared to be. But in secret, she continued building her network. Through Jinho, she acquired property in the capital under false names. Safe houses where she could hide if necessary. She stockpiled money, medicines, supplies. She also began investigating Prince Yeonsan more thoroughly. What she found was both useful and disturbing. Yeonsan was drowning in debt from gambling and expensive mistresses. He had no real political power, no allies, no prospects. The Queen Dowager's offer had been his only chance at relevance, which made him desperate. And desperate men were dangerous. Hwa-yeon decided to neutralize him permanently. She sent him a message through a trusted intermediary: "Meet me at the temple on the hill. Midnight. Come alone." Yeonsan arrived at the temple looking paranoid and exhausted. Hwa-yeon was waiting in the shadows, Miran standing guard nearby. "What do you want?" Yeonsan demanded. "I've done everything you asked. I told the Queen Dowager the plan succeeded. I've said nothing to anyone." "I know," Hwa-yeon said, stepping into the moonlight. "And I appreciate your cooperation. But I need to ensure it continues." "How much money do you want?" "Because I don't have." "I don't want your money." Hwa-yeon pulled out a document and handed it to him. "I want you to sign this." Yeonsan unfolded the paper and read. His face went white. This is a confession, he breathed. Of everything. The drugging. The planned assault. The Queen Dowager's scheme. Yes. Sign it. If this ever surfaces, I'll be executed. Exactly. Which is why you'll make sure it never needs to surface. As long as you cooperate with me, the document stays hidden. But if you betray me, if you tell the Queen Dowager about our arrangement, if you try to harm me in any way. She let the threat hang. You're blackmailing me. I'm ensuring mutual survival. You stay silent, you live. Simple. Yeonsan stared at the document, his hands shaking. He had no choice. He knew it. She knew it. He signed. Hwa-yeon took the document and tucked it away safely. Good. Now, here's what you're going to do. You're going to leave the capital. Tonight. I've arranged for your gambling debts to be paid off, all of them. In return, you're going to retire to your country estate and never return to the palace. The Queen Dowager will be suspicious. Tell her you've fallen ill. A wasting sickness. Tell her you need country air to recover. She'll believe it because she'll want to. You're no longer useful to her now that her plan with me has failed. And if she orders me back, then you'll ignore her orders and claim the illness prevents travel. I'll ensure physicians back up your story. Yeonsan looked at her with something like awe. How old are you? Old enough to destroy you if you cross me. Now go. You have 3 hours before I change my mind and send this confession to the Crown Prince. Yeonsan fled. Hwa-yeon watched him disappear into the night and felt a piece of her plan click into place. The Queen Dowager's scheme was neutralized. Prince Yeonsan was exiled. The drugging had stopped. Now she could focus on the wedding. And what came after? The final month before the wedding passed in a blur of ceremonies and preparations. Hwa-yeon endured it all with practiced grace. She saw the Crown Prince only twice during this time. Both occasions were formal, public events. He barely looked at her. When he did, his eyes held nothing but cold obligation. Lady Min, meanwhile, grew more desperate. She tried several times to arrange accidents for Hwa-yeon, a spooked horse, a broken balcony railing, food that mysteriously made servants ill. Hwa-yeon avoided them all. She had the advantage of knowing what to watch for. Finally, the wedding day arrived. Hwa-yeon dressed in the same crimson and gold robes, the same heavy ornaments. She looked exactly as she had in her previous life. But inside, everything was different. This time, she wasn't a naive girl hoping for love. This time, she was a strategist entering enemy territory. The ceremony was magnificent. Thousands of witnesses. Elaborate rituals. Vows spoken with perfect formality. And then, just like before, she was led to the bridal chamber. The same room. The same candles. The same silk sheets. She waited. 3 hours passed. The door opened. Crown Prince Lee Jinhyun entered, his face carved from ice. And Hwa-yeon smiled. Because she knew exactly what would happen next. And this time, she was ready. Crown Prince Lee Jinhyun stood in the doorway, backlit by the corridor lanterns, and Hwa-yeon felt the strangest sensation, like watching a play she'd already seen, knowing every line before it was spoken. He looked exactly as he had before. Cold. Distant. Beautiful in that untouchable way that made weak women weep. His wedding robes were black and gold, formal and severe. His jaw was set like he was preparing for battle rather than a wedding night. But this time, Hwa-yeon wasn't afraid. She stood from where she'd been sitting on the edge of the bed, her crimson robes pooling around her like blood. She kept her face serene, her hands folded demurely in front of her. "Your Highness," she said softly, bowing her head in the perfect gesture of wifely submission. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the surprise flicker across his face. He'd expected crying, begging, the desperate plea of a rejected bride. Instead, she waited calmly, as if his presence was neither exciting nor distressing. Just expected. "I will not touch you," he said, exactly as before. Hwa-yeon tilted her head slightly. "I know." The 2 words landed differently than her previous response had. Not a plea or a question. Just a statement of fact. Jinhyun's brow furrowed. "You know? You love Lady Min," Hwa-yeon said simply. This marriage is political. You were forced into it by the Queen Dowager. You have no interest in me beyond fulfilling the minimum requirements of duty. She paused. Did I miss anything? He stared at her, completely thrown off balance. This wasn't in his script. You're remarkably accepting of this situation, he said carefully. Would you prefer I cry? Beg you to stay? Throw myself at your feet? Hwa-yeon's voice remained pleasant, almost conversational. I could do that if it would make you feel better about yourself. But it seems wasteful of both our time. Jinhyun's jaw tightened. You speak very freely for someone in your position. My position, Hwa-yeon repeated. Crown princess. Your wife in name only. A political pawn. Yes, I'm aware of my position, Your Highness. The question is, are you aware of yours? What is that supposed to mean? Hwa-yeon walked to the window, deliberately turning her back on him. It was a subtle act of disrespect that wouldn't be lost on a prince. It means we're both trapped in this arrangement. You with your duty to produce heirs and maintain the succession. Me with my duty to be the decorative wife who asks no questions and makes no demands. We can fight it and make each other miserable, or we can find a way to make it tolerable. She turned to face him, and in the candlelight, her expression was unreadable. I don't love you, Your Highness. I don't expect you to love me. But I would prefer not to be actively humiliated. The rejection on our wedding night will be noticed. Gossiped about. It will diminish both of us. Jinhyun stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. His eyes narrowed. What are you proposing? A bargain. You maintain the appearance of a functional marriage, spend a few hours here tonight, leave at dawn so the servants see you exit my chambers. In return, I won't interfere with your relationship with Lady Min. I won't demand your attention or affection. I'll play the dutiful wife in public and leave you alone in private. It was a gamble. A complete reversal from her previous life's desperate pleading. But Hwa-yeon was counting on one thing, Jinhyun's pride. He was a crown prince. A man trained from birth to think strategically. And she was offering him exactly what he wanted: freedom to be with Lady Min, without the scandal and political damage of an obviously failed marriage. Why would you agree to such an arrangement? He asked suspiciously. What do you gain? Peace, Hwa-yeon said. And the ability to live my life without constantly wondering if you'll cast me aside the moment it's convenient. This way, we both know where we stand. Jinhyun studied her for a long moment. She could see him calculating, weighing the advantages and risks. You're not what I expected, he said finally. Neither are you, Your Highness. A strange silence fell between them. Not comfortable exactly, but not hostile either. Just transactional. Very well, Jinhyun said. I'll stay until dawn. We'll maintain appearances. But understand this, Seo Hwa-yeon, this changes nothing. I will never love you. Never want you. This is business, nothing more. Understood, Hwa-yeon said. She gestured to a chair near the window. You can sit there if you prefer. I won't bother you. Jinhyun looked almost amused. You're a strange woman. So I've been told. He sat, stiff and formal, in the chair. Hwa-yeon returned to the bed and picked up a book, poetry she'd been pretending to read earlier. They existed in the same space like two strangers waiting for the same carriage, polite but separate. Hours passed. The candles burned lower. Outside, the palace grew quiet as the celebration ended and servants retired. Around midnight, Jinhyun spoke. Why did you agree to this marriage? Hwa-yeon looked up from her book. I didn't have a choice. My family arranged it. You could have refused. Found a way out. And lived with the shame of rejecting a royal match? Had my family disowned and stripped of position? No, Your Highness. Women like me don't have the luxury of refusal. He was quiet for a moment. I suppose that's true. Besides, Hwa-yeon added, even a cold marriage to a crown prince is safer than the alternatives. Safer how? She met his eyes. You may not love me, but you're not cruel. You won't beat me or abuse me. You'll leave me alone, which is more than many wives can say about their husbands. Jinhyun looked uncomfortable. Is that what you think of marriage? That the best you can hope for is to be ignored? It's what I know of marriage, Your Highness. Women are property. The best we can hope for is to be valuable enough to be treated well. That's a bleak view. It's an honest view. They fell silent again. But something had shifted. Not warmth, they were too far from that. But a grudging respect. She wasn't what he'd expected. And he wasn't quite what she'd remembered. Maybe the first time around, she'd been too desperate, too pleading, and it had disgusted him. This time, her indifference intrigued him. At dawn, as promised, Jinhyun stood to leave. He paused at the door. "We'll maintain this arrangement," he said. "But if you betray me, if you cause problems for Lady Min or try to manipulate this situation—" "I won't," Hwa-yeon interrupted. "I have no interest in fighting battles I can't win. You've made your choice. I accept it." He nodded once and left. The servants who saw him exit her chambers at dawn would report exactly what was expected. The marriage had been consummated. The crown princess had done her duty. Only Hwa-yeon knew the truth. And she smiled. The first month of marriage was a careful dance. In public, Hwa-yeon played the perfect crown princess. She attended ceremonies, greeted foreign dignitaries, participated in palace rituals. She was gracious, modest, and forgettable in exactly the way powerful men preferred. In private, she was building her empire. Through Jinho, she'd expanded her business interests. She now had stakes in 3 trading companies, 2 medicinal suppliers, and a network of informants throughout the capital. Her wealth was growing exponentially. She also began cultivating relationships within the palace. Not with the obvious power players, those were already spoken for. Instead, she targeted the overlooked ones. The head of the kitchen staff, who controlled all food preparation and could be invaluable for information about poisonings. The chief laundress, whose servants handled all the palace clothing and could report on who was meeting whom based on scents and stains. The night watch captain, whose guards saw everything that happened after dark. Hwa-yeon gave them small gifts, showed them respect, asked about their families. Slowly, methodically, she built loyalty among the people who actually ran the palace while the nobles plotted above them. She also began studying the palace's physical layout in detail. Secret passages, escape routes, places where one could hide or observe unseen. Knowledge was power. And Hwa-yeon was collecting knowledge like a miser collecting gold. 6 weeks into her marriage, Lady Min made her move. Hwa-yeon was in the garden, ostensibly enjoying the spring flowers, when Lady Min happened to walk by with her attendants. "Crown Princess," Lady Min said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "How lovely to see you. You look well." The emphasis on the last word was calculated. "You look well for someone whose husband doesn't want her." Hwa-yeon smiled pleasantly. "Thank you, Lady Min. You look radiant as always. That shade of jade suits you beautifully." Lady Min's smile tightened slightly. She'd expected anger, jealousy, tears. Instead, she got politeness. "I wanted to speak with you privately," Lady Min said, dismissing her attendants with a wave. Woman to woman. Hwa-yeon gestured for her own servants to step back. "Of course." When they were relatively alone, Lady Min dropped the pretense. "I know about your arrangement with the Crown Prince," she said bluntly. "The separate chambers. The lack of intimacy. Do you?" Hwa-yeon's expression didn't change. "Everyone knows. The servants talk. You're the only one pretending otherwise. If everyone knows, then why do you feel the need to inform me?" Lady Min's eyes flashed. "I want you to understand your position. You're his wife in name only. I am the woman he loves. The woman he comes to every night. The woman who actually shares his bed." "Congratulations," Hwa-yeon said mildly. The response clearly wasn't what Lady Min expected. She looked almost confused. "You're not upset? Why would I be upset? You've stated facts. The Crown Prince loves you. I'm aware of this. It's not new information. Most wives would be furious. Humiliated. Most wives were probably married to men they loved, or at least hoped to love. I have no such illusions." Lady Min studied her with narrowed eyes. "What game are you playing?" "No game. I'm simply accepting reality. You have the Crown Prince's heart. I have the title. We each have what the Queen Dowager gave us." The Queen Dowager, Lady Min stopped herself, but not before Hwa-yeon caught the flash of anger in her eyes. "Interesting." Lady Min resented the Queen Dowager. "That was useful information. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss?" Hwa-yeon asked pleasantly. Lady Min leaned in close, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Stay out of my way. Don't try to seduce him. Don't try to create problems. Just sit in your gilded cage and be grateful you have a roof over your head. I appreciate the advice, Hwa-yeon said. Though I should mention, I have no interest in seducing the crown prince. As I said, I know my place. She paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, but you should know yours as well, Lady Min. You're his lover, not his wife. If he needs an heir, he won't come to you. He'll come to me. Because legitimate children require a legitimate wife. Lady Min's face went white, then red. You. Have a pleasant afternoon, Hwa-yeon said, turning away. The flowers are particularly beautiful this time of year. She walked away, leaving Lady Min trembling with rage. It was a calculated risk, that last comment. But Hwa-yeon needed to establish boundaries. Lady Min could have the crown prince's love, his knights, his heart. But she needed to understand that Hwa-yeon held something she could never have, legitimacy. And when the time came, that legitimacy would matter more than love ever could. That evening, Hwa-yeon received an unexpected summons. The crown prince requested her presence in his private study. She went, curious. This was outside their arrangement. He'd barely spoken to her since the wedding night beyond what was required for public appearances. Jinhyun was standing at his desk when she entered, his face thunderous. What did you say to Lady Min? He demanded without preamble. So Lady Min had gone crying to him. Predictable. We had a conversation in the garden, Hwa-yeon said calmly. She wanted to clarify our respective positions in your life. I agreed with her assessment. She said you threatened her. I did no such thing. I merely pointed out a fact, that legitimate heirs require a legitimate wife. If that sounded like a threat, perhaps she should examine why the truth frightens her. Jinhyun's jaw clenched. We had an arrangement. You said you wouldn't interfere with my relationship with her. And I haven't. I didn't seek her out. I didn't insult her. I didn't attempt to undermine her. She approached me and demanded I know my place. I simply reminded her that she should know hers as well. You deliberately provoked her. She provoked herself, Your Highness. I merely held up a mirror. They stared at each other across the study. Jinhyun looked like he wanted to rage at her, but he couldn't quite find justification for it. She'd done nothing technically wrong. Let me be clear, he said coldly. Lady Min is important to me. If you hurt her, I won't, Hwa-yeon interrupted. As long as she doesn't hurt me first. I'm perfectly happy to coexist peacefully. But I won't be bullied, Your Highness. Not by her. Not by anyone. She feels threatened by you. Then perhaps you should reassure her instead of blaming me for her insecurity. Jinhyun looked shocked that she'd spoken to him that way. Crown princesses didn't contradict their husbands. They certainly didn't offer advice on how to manage mistresses. But Hwa-yeon was tired of the old rules. They'd gotten her killed once. She wouldn't follow them to her grave a second time. You're very bold for someone in such a precarious position, Jinhyun said softly. Dangerously. My position is only precarious if I make it so, Hwa-yeon replied. I'm your legal wife. That gives me certain protections, whether you like it or not. You can hate me, ignore me, wish I didn't exist, but you can't simply eliminate me without enormous political consequences. The Queen Dowager made sure of that when she chose me. It was true. Divorcing or disposing of a crown princess without cause would create massive scandal. The Queen Dowager had bound them together deliberately. Jinhyun seemed to realize this. His expression shifted from anger to frustration to grudging acknowledgement. What do you want? He asked finally. Nothing you're not already giving me. Freedom to live my life. Respect as crown princess. And the understanding that while you may control my public role, you don't control me. Every husband controls his wife. Perhaps. But I'm not every wife. Another long silence. Then, unexpectedly, Jinhyun laughed. It was a short, bitter sound, but genuine. No, he said. You're definitely not. He waved his hand dismissively. Go. But remember, our arrangement stands. Don't cause problems, and I won't make your life difficult. Agreed, Hwa-yeon said. She left the study with a strange sense of accomplishment. She'd stood her ground. Established boundaries. Shown him she couldn't be easily intimidated. It was a small victory. But small victories accumulated. 3 months into the marriage, Hwa-yeon made her most important move yet. She arranged a private meeting with the Queen Dowager. The old woman received her in the same sitting room as before, her eyes sharp and calculating. "Crown Princess," the Queen Dowager said. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to discuss the succession, Your Majesty." The Queen Dowager's eyebrows rose. "Bold topic. Necessary topic. The Crown Prince and I have been married for 3 months. The court is beginning to wonder when we'll produce an heir. And I wanted you to know that I understand my duty. I'm prepared to fulfill it." The Queen Dowager leaned forward slightly. "Explain." Hwa-yeon kept her voice level and businesslike. "The Crown Prince has made it clear he has no interest in me personally. However, for the sake of the succession, an heir is necessary. I'm proposing we approach this pragmatically. You want to conceive without affection. Many royal marriages function that way. As long as the bloodline is secured, personal feelings are irrelevant." The Queen Dowager studied her. "You've changed since the wedding. You're more assertive." "I've accepted reality, Your Majesty." Fighting it seemed pointless. "And you think you can convince the Crown Prince to bed you?" "I think," Hwa-yeon said carefully, "that the Crown Prince understands duty. If you speak to him about the necessity of an heir, he'll comply. It need only happen once or twice. Just enough to ensure conception." It was a dangerous gamble. Hwa-yeon was essentially asking the Queen Dowager to pressure Jinhyun into fulfilling his marital duties. But she needed it documented. Needed it officially sanctioned. Because when the pregnancy happened, and it would happen, on her terms, she needed everyone to believe the children were legitimate. The Queen Dowager considered this for a long time. "Very well," she said finally. "I'll speak to my grandson. But understand this, Crown Princess, if you fail to produce an heir, there will be consequences." "I understand, Your Majesty. You may go." Hwa-yeon bowed and left, her heart pounding. The pieces were falling into place. The Queen Dowager would pressure Jinhyun. He would comply out of duty. And Hwa-yeon would ensure that when the time came, everything appeared exactly as it should. 1 week later, Jinhyun came to her chambers. It was late evening. Hwa-yeon was preparing for bed when he entered without knocking, his face set in grim determination. "The Queen Dowager has made her wishes clear," he said without preamble. "We need an heir." Hwa-yeon kept her expression neutral. "I'm aware. This doesn't change anything between us. This is purely for succession." "I understand. Once you're with child, we'll return to our previous arrangement." "Agreed." He looked almost angry that she wasn't making this harder. "You're really just accepting this? What choice do either of us have, Your Highness? We both have duties. This is one of them." Jinhyun seemed to deflate slightly. He'd been prepared for resistance, perhaps hoping for it so he could refuse. Her compliance took away his excuse. "Fine," he said. "Then we'll proceed." It was the most unromantic, clinical approach to conception imaginable. But Hwa-yeon preferred it that way. No pretense. No false affection. Just a transaction. And as Jinhyun approached her, as the night progressed with all the warmth of a business arrangement, Hwa-yeon's mind was elsewhere. She was thinking of the children she would bear. Jien, Miho, Saran. In her previous life, she'd loved them desperately in those final moments before death. 3 perfect babies she'd never gotten to know. This time would be different. This time, she would raise them, teach them, train them. This time, they wouldn't just be her children. They would be her weapons, her legacy, her revenge. Comment: the Crown Prince is doomed if you can feel the trap closing around him. He has no idea what Hwa-yeon is planning. Like if you're cheering for her every move. Subscribe because part 2 is where we get the pregnancy, the power plays, and the moment everything changes. This story is about to explode.